We ready, Erin?
We are, thank you.
Great, thank you. So, hi everyone, good morning. Let me get my screen in focus here, which of course it's not doing. Oh, sorry, I'm not ready. Anyway, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's Open Education Week webinar. Very pleased to host Amanda Schmidt from SUNY Geneseo to share about Geneseo's first-year blogging project using SUNY Create. Very excited to introduce this. Amanda is the Digital Humanities and Learning Coordinator for SUNY Geneseo's Center for Digital Learning. She's worked to support SUNY Geneseo students and instructors in realizing their digital scholarship interests and goals for the last 2 years, focusing on connecting the liberal arts education with the concept of critical digital practice, encouraging the development of responsible and knowledgeable digital citizens. Her previous work in open educational resource publishing plays a significant role in the way she prioritizes open source and interoperability in digital practice and tools. Welcome, Amanda. So happy you're here today.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm happy to see everybody here and seeing what people are posting in the chat for who they are and where they're from. I hope you continue to do that. Yeah, so let me go ahead and share my screen, my slides. Okay, so I'm assuming everyone can see my screen. Go ahead and get started. So hello and welcome to first year blogging project, a case study in SUNY Create. If you are joining us from the last session that was put on by Ed Beck and Sarah Portway, this is kind of like a double header, so to speak, in SUNY Create, and you're going to not just SUNY Create, but the platforms that we use alongside it. So you're going to be hearing a lot of similar concepts, but I hope to frame it in kind of a different way so that you can identify with this project and with the thought process behind the project, and hopefully get inspired to do something similar on your own campus. So, yeah. Oh, I have transitions. I didn't know I had transitions. This is an old template. So I'm going to get a little surprised, I think, as we go forward. Great. All right. So hello, as Michelle said in the introduction, I'm Amanda Schmidt. I'm the Digital Humanities and Learning Coordinator for the Center for Digital Learning at Geneseo. I have been in this position for the past 2 years, and prior to this position, I worked for SUNY OER Services as their OER publishing coordinator. And so while I'm no longer working directly with OER in this new position that's focused on the digital humanities and making those connections between liberal arts and digital practice, I have gotten the opportunity to be introduced a lot more to open source projects, open source platforms and tools and practice, and have been having a lot of fun seeing how that plays into this general open space that we're all in. And so it's also, as I'll explain a little bit later, ties in a lot to what the goal of our center is at Geneseo, and it really resonates with students in similar ways to OER and these more traditional open teaching practices that we're all more familiar with. So I want to start out by giving you a sense of what we're going to talk about today. While Ed did a fabulous job of covering the nitty-gritty of SUNY Create and Open Lab and those types of platforms and tools, but also doing a fabulous job of building on top of that with Sarah. I took so many notes during that presentation. If you're tuning into this as a recording, I highly recommend that you revisit Ed and Sarah's presentation, because it will just get you really excited and thinking about a lot of different things, and also fill in some gaps maybe, hoping there will be no gaps. But I want to I want to discuss SUNY Create, and also Open Lab is going to be featured heavily in my presentation as ways that the way that they exist in on Geneseo have allowed so much opportunity for us. And I'm only going to focus on one part of that opportunity, similar to how Ed did, because it is starting to seep into the campus as a whole, and that's been very exciting. So the way that I'm going to frame this is by telling you a little bit more about the Center for Digital Learning at Geneseo. I think we're a very unique center and a very unique type of initiative at a campus in the SUNY system. We are relatively new, so I'll tell you a little bit about where we came from, what we've been doing, and kind of the excitement that's being generated around our work right now, particularly as it relates to SUNY Create and the projects that we're able to do in platforms that are sustained by SUNY Create in our instances, such as Open Lab. So then we'll go into this case study that is in the title of this presentation as the first year blogging experience. So the first year blogging experience at Geneseo, we have called First Year Chronicles. So we'll go through the inspiration for this project, pre-existing SUNY Create supported infrastructure, i.e. Open Lab. I'll tell you a little bit about the workflow and how that project worked, similar to how Sarah explained her class structure in terms of Open Lab. I'll tell you a little bit about the result. I'm also going to include some data in here because I presented on the assessment that we did of this experience, very, again, similar to Ed and Sarah's presentation. We did an assessment, we did a survey to see how students felt about it, felt about the whole learning experience, but presented that in a more assessment-based conference. And so I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but I do want to point out some, particularly relevant data that I think you'll all find interesting. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we see this particular project going forward. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is the future of SUNY Create, which I don't really know. That's like, spoiler alert, I don't know exactly, but I'm going to tell you about this awesome group of people and our ideas and how passionate we are about sustaining this, where it is within SUNY, so that you can get a sense of how far it reaches, continuing to support it, building upon it at Geneseo, what our vision is for it, and then if you want to get involved, who you can get in contact with. So all of that aside, first thing I'm going to talk to you about is the Center for Digital Learning at SUNY Geneseo. So this is a department that is 2 years old, and it is a department of twos and twos. So the director is Paul Schacht. He's the director for the Center for Digital Learning, but he's also a professor of English at Geneseo, and he's also the assistant to the provost for digital learning and scholarship. And this is maybe a third of what he does at Geneseo. He's extremely involved. He's everywhere at Geneseo. So it's amazing that if we're able to even get this center as active as it is, because we have such great leadership. Paul is able, he's the thinker, he's the big idea guy, and he can connect us to the resources, and he has the ear of the powerful people, and it's great. And then there's me, and I am the Digital Humanities and Learning Coordinator, has been said many times. And I am more responsible for figuring out the structure of our center and getting platforms and tools ready and available for folks. I manage the student affiliates that we have, so students who are interested in learning about the connections that we make in our mission, and also for getting collaborations kind of off the ground. So I wanted to give you a brief quote from our mission, which is that the CDL, Center for Digital Learning, puts digital tools for research and creative expression, classroom learning, and learning at a distance within reach of faculty, staff, and students at SUNY Geneseo. So this is something that we have up to this point been seeking out. We've been seeking out opportunities for collaboration with folks at Geneseo, trying to identify areas that we can kind of wiggle our way into to give ourselves the opportunity to show what we can do. The hope is that eventually we will be sought out. So rather than doing the majority of the seeking. And we are also trying to strike that balance of being proactive and reactive to projects. We want to be able to seek out, but we also want to be able to provide the answers for folks and provide the platforms for them to get things up and running. And there are two core principles that I want to share with you all that are directly related to this Open Education Week and our center. And we do everything kind of under not only these two principles, but certainly these two, being open by nature in this concept of interoperability. So they're core to our mission. They determine the tools and the platforms and methods that we work with. And they're very important for all of the reasons that Ed and that Sarah talked about and that you're familiar with in terms of open education and OER and open educational resources, but also in terms of this notion that we're all also familiar with of sustainability. Working in an open source community is it's a great model for sustainability in our perspective, because it's very highly knowledgeable people with the tools and the skills to maintain and create and develop environments that they're directly invested in. They use these environments. So I think City Tech is a shining beacon of an example for this, but they use these platforms and tools, and they have a stake in keeping them available and keeping them sustained. And so we want to participate in that on principle, but then we also want to, and as principle, it's something that we can show our students is valuable and that they should also be thinking about as they go through their undergraduate experience into their graduate experience and think about ways that they want to focus their research. But also there's a lot of trust there. So we trust that these types of platforms and tools are being responsibly maintained, and we are also there. It has a sense of transparency, so we can see the inner workings. And I think a great example of that is the Open Lab Hub that the team at Open Lab has created. Ed and I are part of it. It's an instance of Open Lab in which we can actually go in and interact with the creators, and it's really fun. And it's a great way to showcase how you can use Open Lab. But there's so much transparency there. They're so open to talking with us and hearing our ideas, and there's a direct line of communication. So these are all great things that we want to support. So going into this first year Chronicles project, essentially it's self-reflective blogging. And so what was the ask for this? Paul Schacht was in an initiative group that is referred to at Geneseo as the Wildly Important Goal Initiative from our provost, Stacey Robertson. And the subcommittee that he was part of is called the New Student Connections and Success. And they came up with this brainstorm idea that they're looking for a space where selected first year students can write reflectively and publicly about their first year experience at Geneseo, including the challenges they were facing and how they were meeting those challenges. And this was discussed in this group. And because Paul was there and he was, he does all of this campus community outreach, he was in the position where he was hearing about this need and he could bring it back to me at our center and say, we need to do something about this, and we have the tools and we have the know-how and the resources. So let's address it. And so I started thinking, okay, this is the ask. What have I experienced in my work with SUNY Create that can help me address this? And the inspiration for the first year Chronicles came directly from the Semester of Living Dangerously at SUNY Oneonta, which was also set up by Ed Beck. And this is a fantastic project that was inspired by the Pandemic Diaries global project that is above it here. And what this did was essentially invite the student community in to talk about what they were living through during the early days of the pandemic. And what we found really valuable about this was how much intrinsic motivation was built into this experience for students. It wasn't just to get the grade done. It wasn't just to get the assignment done. They needed this. And you could tell from their posts that they needed that platform that Ed was able to provide at Oneonta. And they just poured themselves into it. And so we thought, this is a great model to go off of. And now the obviously the writers here are come from very different places, and they're going to be focusing on different things, as I'll explain. But that reflection and that community that they're building is essentially the same. So we have just the thing for this. We have our Geneseo Open Lab. And this is, the screenshot here is the instance of Open Lab that we have at Geneseo. I spun this up back in summer of 2020. So it's 2 years old. And it was something that we had discussed as a center with Ed, and we were interested in exploring. And because of SUNY Create, which I'll explain a little bit more about how that set up the infrastructure for us, it was really easy for us to just run it up. Even if we didn't have something to apply to it quite yet, we were able to get in there, play around, and set up a structure essentially that we could plug and play with later when we had these projects such as this ask coming from the Provost initiative. And so, key things about this, in case you weren't at Ed and Sarah's presentation earlier, it's a WordPress multi-site. It's created and maintained and lovingly cared for by the folks at CUNY, supported by the Graduate Center and City Tech. There are so many cool features to this site, and I'm not going to get into all of them, but the ones that you need to understand for the project are the fact that it's built around these groups. And in our case, we did a little bit of tweaking, but they're courses, organizations, and projects. And these are groups that members, so students can sign up on this site, members can join and participate in. And the coolest part is that each one of these groups has its own WordPress site that it branches off of the multi-site. And that is where group members can have varying levels of control, depending on who the admin is, of what is on their WordPress site. They can do the design and they can do the development under the purview of the larger multi-site. So, I'm the network admin for this and can be there to help them immediately if they need it, but and also to spin things up for people. But it offers people that freedom. So the infrastructure that led to this. So we're kind of building backwards here in this presentation, because we're thinking about specifically the project, what we built it on, and then how we even got to building what we built the project on, which is SUNY Create. It provided us with speed, simplicity, and security, as Ed discussed in the last presentation, where we can really rely on Reclaim to keep things safe for us, to keep things organized, to keep them secure. And we have a one-click install to essentially install the WordPress application. You have to install the WordPress application first, and then after doing that basic application install, you would then add in the Commons in a Box Open Lab plugin, and all of those, that software comes next. So the other thing that we love about being able to work in SUNY Create is that you're provided with your own cPanel. So that's industry standard for web development. And even though this is something that the students aren't interacting with in this particular project, and it's something that really I'm just working on, it's super easy for me to manage this network of exponentially growing sites that we have. And I love especially that there are reliable, flexible, easy backups. We back up to Google Drive. So that doesn't take a drag on the space that we have, because as Ed mentioned, this is a kind of a shared model at this point, but I'll also talk about that a little bit more later. So these are some snapshots from the website, the First Year Chronicles site. We opened it, we spun it up on Open Lab as a project site. You can visit it at First Year Chronicles with hyphens, .geneseo.sunycreate.cloud. And I think that the coolest part about this is that there was very little work that I had to do at the end of this, after the students essentially wrote all of their blog posts to shine it up and make it ready for consumption, public consumption. That was built in along the way. So the students were just building this thing, this artifact, that when they were done with it, when they were done doing the writing part, it was ready. It was ready to be linked to be shared, to be read. And so all of that was really easy and straightforward. So the ask that I had a few slides ago aside, what was our goal? Our goal was to get participating students to understand and practice a few basic digital skills and the related concepts. And that means WordPress, which is what most of the internet is run on. So we wanted to get them comfortable in the interface. We wanted to get them to understand web accessibility in terms of what they need to do to create accessible content on the web. And then we wanted to explain interoperability across word processing programs. So we incorporated discussing Markdown with them, which is a flavor of HTML, so that, you know, most of them are writing in Microsoft Word, but then if they're just copying and pasting from Microsoft Word into WordPress, some wonky things can happen, which I'm sure some of you have experienced if you've worked in that space as well. And so getting them to write in a proprietary platform, and then transfer that text into a more interoperable language, and then explaining why that happens and like how the internet works in that way, was a big goal of ours as a center for students to come away with. So essentially the workflow for this is that we wanted to create a public facing website that only members of the Geneseo community can edit with permission. So we invited INTD, which is it's an interdisciplinary first year writing course. So we have professors from many different disciplines teaching just a first year writing course to introduce freshmen to college writing standards at Geneseo. And so we had 3 instructors participate and their classes. And we visited the participating classes to introduce the project, to explain the goals, and then to teach them how to upload content. So that's when we explain things like Markdown and transferring text between platforms in an efficient way, so that you're not bringing a bunch of junk over from the proprietary word processing programs. And then we would have the students join the project group in Open Lab. And when they joined, we had the option to set member levels. So they could only have certain permissions based on their member level. And then their instructor would be, say, an editor. And then they would have the ability to review what their students were posting and approve it for posting. So students, it wasn't a direct student writing to post to publication process for the students. They would write and then they would submit for review. And then we would review and approve those submissions. And then the instructors would either do that themselves, or they would tell us that these posts have been approved, and then we could go forward. And then at the end of the experience, we wanted to assess student perception of the project. So the things in Open Lab that made our project a success was this multi-site design, which provided us also, very interestingly, with a common header and footer. It seems like a small thing, but this was really cool because it kept the students kind of focused on what this was for. This was a Geneseo project, and so they were reminded of that with the Geneseo specific header that we were able to have that also linked back to the Open Lab homepage. And then we had a common footer that also said Open Lab and SUNY Geneseo. So it was, and also if students are sharing this with other institutions, they can see that connection between this project and Geneseo immediately. And we really liked that. I already talked about the project member levels with specific permissions. So, you can restrict how much a student can access on the site. So since the students aren't running the site, they're just participating in the site. We really liked that. And especially when it's things like self-reflective, honest, vulnerable writing, we wanted the opportunity to have, I guess, safeguard sounds a little intense, but safeguards in place so that we can check in on the writing before it gets published. And then we love that there's a potential for growth. You've already heard about this personal portfolio aspect of Open Lab that was featured in Dr. Portway's class. Students have the ability to have their own website in Open Lab if they're a member. And then there's this potential for cross-class collaboration in the Open Lab structure, but through the social aspect of this platform. So when we went to assess the students after all was said and done, we asked them this list of questions, which briefly I'm just going to go through as how valuable they perceived the project to their first year and the way that they understood their first year at Geneseo. We wanted to know how many posts they read from others. That wasn't a requirement that we had of them, but we realized after the fact, maybe we should have required it. But this actually provided us with some really interesting data. We wanted to know how supported they felt by us. We wanted to know what they felt could have supported them best, and we gave them some options of ideas, mainly additional documentation. And we asked if this had sparked an interest in them learning more about WordPress, if this sparked an interest in them learning more about Markdown or HTML, and if this sparked an interest in them doing more blogging or public-facing writing. So these are their answers, essentially. We had 29 students respond, which was about 40% of our group. And this was just through email and kind of asking them very last minute, hey, can you please fill out this survey? So I think that was a pretty fair response for that. And on a scale of 1 to 5, that first question of the value that they felt this added to their first year experience, they put it at a 3.6. For support, they gave us almost a 4, is how I like to say that one. In their interest in learning more about WordPress, we had 12 students say yes, 16 say no. Interest in learning about Markdown, 11 said yes, 17 said no. Interest in public-facing writing, 11 said yes, 9 said maybe, and then 9 said no. And so, as you can see here, the no's, especially in 3 and 4, kind of have the day, but when we go and analyze that data, I think we'll see something pretty interesting. So for how valuable the experience was by the number of posts read, we see something very cool. So first of all, you can see that 73% of the students who rated the value of the exercise between 1 and 3 didn't read any posts by their peers. Each one of them who said the experience was less than 3 on a scale of valuable to them didn't read any posts. 89% of the students who rated the value of the exercise as 4 or 5 read at least one of the posts by their peers. So something's going on. And then finally, 100%, so 3 out of 3 students who read 4 to 6 of the posts by their peers rated the value at 4 or 5. So I'm not a statistician, but I think the correlation that's going on here, please don't come at me if you're a statistician and I'm not using that correctly, is that the more posts these students read, so this collaboration aspect, this public aspect, this ability for them to write for others, the higher the value was for them at the end. So going forward, based on that data, we would love to develop some more direct collaboration between the participating classes in this project actually in Open Lab. We would really like to take advantage of the social aspects of Open Lab to get students more connected with each other and hopefully get some more value out of that. And then I also would like to encourage more use of the personal student portfolios. They all have memberships on Open Lab now, so might as well make a portfolio, right? So the future, because I know I'm running out of time. Where is SUNY Create now? So this is a basic question. I actually got this question this morning in a completely different meeting of where is it in SUNY? How widespread is the use of SUNY Create? And so these are going through our user base in SUNY Create. These are the schools I found that had significant and recent usage. So Oneonta, obviously. Geneseo, yeah. Buffalo, Oswego, Plattsburgh, and Purchase, and counting. There are people who are getting involved as we speak. So it's very exciting to see that kind of spreading across the system. So for continuing support for SUNY Create, as Ed shared in the last presentation, we're super proud to have SUNY OER Services exploring support models. I think we're going to continue with this cost sharing model. So that's something to keep in mind. And then also there's this, we're looking for the continued use of SUNY Create to focus on innovative teaching methodologies and what that means for student learning. And I think that both the blogging project and Ed and Sarah's project speaks to that at a really deep level. Building upon SUNY Create at Geneseo, we love that it provides instructors with low barrier access to web platforms for research and instruction. So we want to see more of that happen and empower faculty to actually get into SUNY Create, not just Open Lab, but if they need more support from us and they can't take on spinning up a web application on their own, Open Lab is such a quick and easy way for us to get them started. And I mean, you know how it is with these types of projects where they might be a little bit lofty and you get excited and you talk about them. And if you don't have something set up right away for them to get started immediately, it can just, if you're not there to catch the ball, it's going to fly past your head. So Open Lab lets us do that. And then we really want to see students develop their web management skills, especially at Geneseo. Without a computer science program here, this is something where we would be able to provide to them by using SUNY Create. So if you want to get involved, we have an account request form at sunycreate.cloud where you can tell us a little bit about your project and what your vision is for using SUNY Create. The people that goes to are basically Ed and myself. And if you want to get involved and don't want to fill out the request form, you can email us. Yeah, so thank you. That's all I have.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if anyone has any questions. Oh, there's my cat right on cue.
Oh, wow.
Hey, Amanda, can I ask the first question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so you really poured yourself into this project and helped make it successful. And I can tell that a lot from the way you talked about it. To do this project again, how much additional effort would it need to do a similar project or a similar blogging project now that you've got the template or you've made the first one?
That's a great question, and I'm really glad you asked it because I can answer almost none. This was a lot of front-loaded work, and so it did take a while to get set up, but less because it had been done in these kind of bite-sized chunks that we're building this infrastructure of Open Lab, building Open Lab at Geneseo. That took some time, but not that much time. And then getting this project and trying to create the best platform for it within Open Lab took some time, but not as much time as it would have if I hadn't done the first part, right? So it's all about that building process. But now that this particular project, we're planning on running it again. We want to run it again in the fall. And that is going to be a ton more straightforward for us. The only thing that's going to make it any kind of significant work is going to be, I just can't help myself from making it harder. So adding those things, but I'm able to add those more exciting things now that the basics have been, the template is there.
Hey, Amanda, this is Mark. Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I'm curious if part of maybe the learning outcomes for students is that they also learn what it means to manage a digital identification. Like, what does it mean to manage their digital footprint on the web? And if any of the students had articulated the value add to that.
That's a great point, as Erin said in the chat. I think that there's a lot of potential for that conversation, especially in something like Ed and Sarah's presentation, where you're thinking about students with their own individual sites. In our specific case, we had one site that the students were participating with and engaging with. And so their identity online in that way was a lot more controlled and a lot more had a more narrow frame around it than if they were developing their own portfolio. But what I will say is that it was interesting to see them grapple with the public facing aspect of this. So that public facing writing, self-reflective writing is super vulnerable if it's done right. So we recognized that. And we could see the way that students were trying to negotiate that spotlight on them. I had one student who in each post, he would say, "Hi, loyal readers," and really engage in that fourth wall. So it wasn't something we were able to really get into, aside from letting students know this is going to be online, people are going to be able to see it, so keep that in mind when you're writing. And there were ways for students to do that in a way that wasn't too personal, wasn't too vulnerable, in a more general way. But then some students really kind of went all out and really shared part of themselves. And the more qualitative feedback we got from that public part of it was what we wanted, which was students saying, "Oh, I'm not alone. You know, it was amazing to see other people kind of going through some of what I was going through and felt a little bit less like an outsider." So I hope that answered part of your question.
No, it did. Thank you very much. This is very impressive.
Thank you. Just checking the chat here. Yeah.
I have a question, Amanda, if no one else does.
Yes.
Jump in with one. So this is an exclusively freshman year project, right? Is there any possibility of following the student, maybe doing like some sort of like capstone senior year thing? Like that would be so, like, to revisit it, or I don't know, do something with it on the way out.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea, Michelle. And we haven't talked about that explicitly yet, but that's exactly the kind of thing that we're excited to think about, because we have this set up and it's scalable. So we'd love to see that. And what I will say about it being a specifically freshman year thing is that not all of our students were freshmen, because some students had to have had to retake this class in college writing. And so they were coming at it as looking back at their freshman year, which were really powerful posts, especially thinking about, you know, if they did read the other students' posts and then, you know, think about that in relation to their experience in the first year. It was really provocative. So, but yeah, thank you for that idea. I would love to explore that more. So I see that someone in the chat had a question. Oh, yes. Awesome. Submitting to SUNY Create, good. Oh, and Ed saw it, good, okay, wonderful. It's exciting. Yeah, are there any other questions that I missed in the chat? Or does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to unmute. Well, I want to thank you all so much for coming to my presentation, and remind you all that this followed Ed Beck and Sarah Portway's wonderful presentation on another SUNY Create and Open Lab project. So if you're watching the recording, or even if you're here now and you weren't able to catch that, please do go back and check out that recording, because I think it's we affectionately refer to these two presentations as double headers. So you'll want to go back and check that out. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Amanda. Take a peek at the chat because there's lots of kudos going on in there for you and for the project. So it's great. And thank everyone for your participation in today's webinar. And thank you, of course, Amanda, to you for sharing today. So the full schedule of events happening this week, along with a link to register and view recordings, can be found in the link in the chat. It's also on the slide, and I'm confident Erin will put it in the chat. There it is. Erin's the queen of links in chat. She's superb. That's the full schedule of events. Please register, view recordings, share with your colleagues across campus if you hear something that you know someone might be interested in. I know you're on it, Erin. And also there's a feedback survey, which would be terrific, right? So these are always iterative. Hope to do better, broader, deeper engagement of our SUNY community. So please complete the feedback survey to help us plan for future offerings. And of course, we hope to see you at another Open Ed session this week. Thank you again to Amanda, Rava, excellent. And it was great to see everyone. Erin, thanks for asking me to host. It was terrific.
Thank you for hosting, Michelle, and also to Amanda. We really appreciate just all of the presentations we've had this week. And it was great that you and Ed and Sarah could be back to back like this.
Thank you very much.